What if an entire continent could literally be programmed for success using its own deep history as the source code? Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into a really fascinating 2026 blueprint by Eric and Sarko that proposes exactly that, an African operating system. We're going to unpack how blending ancient traditions with cutting-edge platform engineering can completely transform lives. To really wrap our heads around this, think about your smartphone for a second. It absolutely needs an OS, like iOS or Android, just to wake up and take requests, right? Well, societies need an operating system too. A societal OS provides the foundational software for how people survive, how they share resources, and how they keep institutions running without crashing. It essentially designs the buffers and interfaces of daily life, insulating people from threats and making sure everything holds together seamlessly. But that begs a pretty massive question. How on earth do you build an operating system for an entire continent? Right now, a lot of foreign development efforts stall out because they're basically trying to force Mac software onto a PC. It just doesn't fit the local hardware. The goal here is to build a system powered by Africa's own cultural bedrock, its history and its community networks, rather than constantly trying to copy and paste foreign frameworks that, quite frankly, simply do not fit. Okay, so here is the system architecture we're going to cover today. 1. A societal operating system. 2. History's missing middle. 3. The heptarchy of skills. 4. Engineering the data substrate. 5. Regression and cultural compatibility. And finally, 6. Reclaiming the African narrative. Let's jump right into Section 1, a societal operating system, building from within. Let's look at why traditional development models are really struggling to interface with African realities. You see, foreign donor agencies often push what's called a design-from-nowhere approach. They basically parachute in these siloed, Western-centric models that completely ignore local context and indigenous knowledge. A true African operating system absolutely must be homegrown, built from the ground up. It has to embrace knowledge alliances, organically merging modern technology with the actual historical and cultural realities of the people who are using it every day. Moving on to Section 2. History's missing middle, the Kanem-Bornu connective tissue. To code this new OS, we first have to restore some deleted historical data that Western cartographers largely ignored. Because Africa actually has incredibly deep civilizational continuity. All the way back in the 3rd century, the Persian leader Mani recognized Axum as a major global axis of power, right alongside Rome and China. Fast forward to the medieval era, and you see these massive empires flourishing. The capital depletion that happened later between the 13th and 16th centuries, well, that wasn't due to a lack of advancement. It was fundamentally an issue of unequal firepower, specifically the introduction of foreign explosives and gunpowder that Africa simply didn't have access to at the time. For a long time, traditional history falsely separated the desert from the savanna, creating this sort of missing middle. But take the Kanem-Bornu Empire, for example. It was the vital connective tissue of trade linking the Nile Valley to West Africa. For modern system designers, this deep, pre-existing network is the original infrastructure they need to tap into and build upon today. All right, Section 3, the heptarchy of skills, 7 pillars of the operating system. Let's look at the core framework needed to actually reverse that historical capital depletion. So this is the heptarchy. It's a 7-part architecture of core skills. We're talking about everything from digital architecture and platform engineering, all the way over to AI and African humanities. To turn Africa from these isolated islands of tech excellence into one unified, continent-wide engine, this is the exact skill stack that has to be cultivated locally. Now, we obviously can't cover all 7 today, but let's take solution and platform engineering as an example. African governments often struggle with process delivery, but if they start treating operational public sector issues like software bugs, they can dynamically solve structural bottlenecks at a fraction of the cost of richer nations just by applying agile platform engineering. It's a huge game changer. Which brings us to Section 4, engineering the data substrate, AI in the African context. Think of this as the sensory apparatus that helps the whole system self-correct. And you really have to notice the specific sequence required here. You literally cannot just plug a Western AI model into Africa. It doesn't work. Those models are trained on Western data and completely lack local context. So data engineers first have to build a foundational pipeline that ingests Africa's massive linguistic diversity and its rich informal economy. Only after mitigating that baked-in bias and building out that local substrate can you deploy AI that actually understands the continent and gives you actionable insights. Okay, Section 5, regression and cultural compatibility, layering new systems on old. This is where a very specific software concept directly meets cultural preservation. If you know software development, you're familiar with regression testing. It basically makes sure a new feature doesn't accidentally crash code that already works. In an African societal context, this means rigorously testing new digital platforms or even new institutional proposals to guarantee they don't break the existing community traditions they are supposedly trying to help. And this quote really just says it all. We cannot blow up Africa. I mean, you wouldn't push a software update that destroys a live production server, right? So you absolutely cannot just overwrite what already exists in a society. We have to carefully, intentionally layer modern tech over the informal economies and the social bonds that are already keeping people alive.
Finally, Section 6, Reclaiming the African Narrative, the Humanities Layer. Let's talk about why the humanities are such an indispensable load-bearing pillar of this entire project. Because to build a truly sovereign digital state, your software engineers literally have to work side by side with historians, linguists, and philosophers. Tech on its own is completely blind to context. The humanities provide the cultural compass that's needed to recover the organizational blueprints of Africa that were interrupted by external forces for so long. So, when we zoom out, this massive historical picture really comes into focus. You have this high civilizational parity in ancient times, which was followed by a 500-year dip of capital depletion. But the absolute crucial takeaway here is this. Those recent centuries of struggle, they are just a disruption. They are not the baseline. The future African operating system is entirely about restoring that high parity driven 100% from within. We noted earlier that Axum was once recognized as a central pillar of the ancient world. And now, by weaving cutting-edge technology together with its deep historical humanities, Africa is coding its own sovereign future. Which leaves us with one pretty profound question. When this new societal operating system is fully synthesized and finally booted up, how is it going to completely reshape the global balance of power? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today, and keep questioning the systems that run our world.